50 Cent, calling his enemy a rat for 2 straight decades and daring him to do something about it from inside a federal prison. And then, in March of 2026, 50 Cent told the whole internet that Jimmy Henchman got stabbed on a gurney inside that same prison. Then Henchman picked up the phone. Then the Bureau of Prisons made a statement. And suddenly, nobody's story was matching up. A man already buried under multiple life sentences, calling from a monitored federal prison phone, telling the world that 50 Cent is lying, and the Bureau of Prisons backing him up. This is the full story of how one of hip-hop's deadliest beefs, a war that put one man in the ground and another away for life, just reignited in 2026 with a single social media post, a viral phone call, and claims of footage that nobody can actually find. Let's get into it. For about some days now, the timeline has been in chaos. A clip, allegedly showing Jimmy Henchman getting stabbed, suddenly surfaced, and it didn't come from a random source. It was pushed into the spotlight by 50 Cent himself. For years, Henchman had denied that anything like that ever happened. No footage, no proof. Just street rumors that never fully stuck. But now, with visuals in circulation, the conversation has completely shifted. Old tensions are flaring back up, and people are once again picking sides. That is, academics watching a claim made by rapper Mino, who had publicly argued that G-Unit came out on the losing end of their battle with Henchman's camp. Whether or not you agree with Mino's characterization, the very fact that this debate was still being had in 2026, loud, passionate, unresolved, tells you everything you need to know about just how deep this goes. So, who exactly is Jimmy Henchman, and what did he do to earn 20+ years of relentless, gleefully public contempt from one of the most famous men in hip-hop? James Rosemond, the man the streets knew as Jimmy Henchman, was, at the absolute peak of his power, one of the most significant behind-the-scenes operators in all of American music. Through his company, Czar Entertainment, formerly known as Henchman Entertainment, Rosemond managed and worked with some of the biggest names in the industry during the height of their commercial dominance. The Game, Akon, Gucci Mane, Sean Kingston, Brandy. Even Salt and Peppa had ties to his operation. He reportedly brokered over $60 million in deals for his clients and was credited with helping to drive over 20 million records sold through his roster at their mid-2000s peak. He also helped negotiate one of the most financially massive boxing bouts in history, the 2002 Mike Tyson versus Lennox Lewis fight, which generated over $100 million in revenue. The man was not a footnote. He was not peripheral. He was central, connected, and operating at the very top of the industry food chain. And right there, the game, is precisely where everything begins to unravel for everybody involved. In February of 2005, 50 Cent made one of the most dramatic, most calculated, most devastating power moves in hip-hop history, live on air. During a Hot 97 radio interview, without a moment's hesitation, he publicly and permanently severed the Game's connection to G-Unit. Just like that, no warning, no press release, no private conversation. The Game was out of the group, and Jimmy Henchman, the Game's manager at the time, the man steering the ship, suddenly found himself in the absolute center of the conflict, whether he had wanted to be or not. Now, whether or not that characterization is accurate, and Henchman has consistently denied being the engineer of the Game's rebellion against 50 Cent, the perception on 50's side was locked in and absolute. In Jimmy Henchman's world, in G-Unit's world, the manager is the villain. The manager is the puppet master. And in the culture of New York hip-hop in 2005, where perception carries the same weight as fact and sometimes heavier, that was all the justification anyone needed. It is worth noting here, because precision matters and this research demands it, that the tension between 50's camp and Henchman's camp actually predated the Game's departure by several years. Tony Yayo, 50's closest G-Unit lieutenant, has explained in separate interviews that much of the foundational animosity was inherited from the rivalry between 50's manager Chris Lighty of Violator Records and Henchman's Czar operation, a rivalry rooted in industry positioning, jealousy, and raw power struggles in New York's hip-hop hierarchy as far back as 2003. Shots were reportedly fired at violators' offices. Shots were fired at Lighty's vehicle. This conflict had blood on it before 50 Cent and Jimmy Henchman ever stood face to face and exchanged a word. But the moment the game fallout exploded in February of 2000, Hausan 5, the temperature went from simmering to genuinely volcanic. What followed was not a diss track battle. What followed was an all-out war between two camps. And it would not end until a man lay dead in the Bronx and another was hauled into federal court. And 50 Cent, for his part, has never once softened his position on who Jimmy Henchman is and what he represents. Not in 2005, not in 2015, not in 2026. Those are 50 Cent's words. Unfiltered, no subtext, no metaphor. Just the raw, unvarnished label he has been slapping on Jimmy Henchman for the better part of 2 decades and shows no intention of ever removing. And that exact energy, that same relentless, almost cheerful contempt, is what exploded across the internet on March 29th, 2026, when 50 Cent picked up his phone and composed a post that would spend the next 72 hours ricocheting around every corner of hip-hop media. Here is precisely what 50 Cent posted on Instagram that day. According to Hot New Hip Hop, LMAO, Jimmy the Rat got poked up in the joint. It's hard to be tough around tough. LOL. He then followed that up, after some version of the original post was deleted, with a second, even more specific wave. World put Jimmy on a gurney, LOL. 3 months ago in Hazleton, old Rat A, lying now he in Missouri. I know what's up. See, it's hard to be tough around the tough. Sit with that for a second. One of the most famous men in hip-hop, a man with a television empire, a vitamin water fortune, multiple Grammy nominations, and a devoted global audience in the tens of millions, was sitting somewhere in his mansion and typing out posts mocking his incarcerated rival, allegedly being stabbed in a federal prison. And the post detonated immediately. Within hours, reaction videos were flooding YouTube, commentary was bouncing across X, and major outlets including Hot New Hip Hop, Complex, All Hip Hop, and even Hindustan Times were running full articles on the alleged prison attack. The timeline was moving at 1,000 miles per hour, and somewhere inside the walls of a federal penitentiary in Pollock, Louisiana, a 61-year-old man serving multiple life sentences was about to find out his name was trending. For all the wrong reasons. There is something uniquely disorienting, something almost surreal, about hearing a man respond to rumors of his own near death from inside the very institution where those rumors claim he nearly died. And yet that is precisely what the internet received when the phone rang, and James Roseman, Jimmy Henchman, picked it up. The call was arranged through a connection that is itself a story worth telling. It was facilitated by the son of Kenneth Supreme McGriff, another legendary, notorious, and deeply complicated figure in hip-hop's criminal underworld, who carries his own significant and fraught history with 50 Cent. McGriff's son put Henchman on the phone. The call was recorded, and within hours of being posted on No Jumper's X account, it had gone viral in the way that only a handful of prison phone calls in the history of hip-hop ever have. He did not sound like a man who had recently been stabbed and placed on a stretcher. He did not sound broken, afraid, or diminished. He sounded, if anything, like a man running on a very specific flavor of exhausted irritation. The particular kind of tired that comes from spending 2 straight decades dealing with the same adversary and being deeply, profoundly worn out by the obligation to keep addressing him. 15 years. James Roseman has been inside federal custody for 15 years. And in those 15 years, by his own emphatic, detailed, and specific account, he has never once been in a physical altercation, never had an argument, never had a knife pulled on him, never had to pull one on anyone else. He made that clear on the call, and the specificity of the language he used was striking. According to All Hip Hop's exclusive reporting on the call, Henchman stated,
"I've been down 15 years. I've never even had an argument in this place. A lot of people in my position, given my notoriety, wouldn't survive this situation. I've never even had an argument with somebody, even a shouting match."
He went even further, saying, Nobody ain't never pull a knife on me. I've never had to pull a knife on no one. It's never been that situation. Now, you may be sitting there thinking, of course the man is going to deny it. What else is he going to do? He's not going to call from prison and confirm his own stabbing. And that would be a reasonable instinct were it not for one very significant complication. The Federal Bureau of Prisons said the exact same thing. According to Complex's reporting, the BOP, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the actual governing body of the institution where Roseman is housed, was contacted directly by media outlets, specifically asking about the LA jet attack on James Roseman. Their response was unambiguous and unqualified. The information about an attack on Roseman, they said, was not true. And it does not stop there. 50 Cent's posts contain several specific verifiable claims beyond the stabbing itself. He claimed Henchman had been housed at USP Hazleton and was then transferred to Missouri. Prison records tell an entirely different story. As of late March of 2026, James Roseman is confirmed to be housed at USP Pollock, a high-security United States penitentiary located in Pollock, Louisiana. Not Hazleton, West Virginia, not Missouri, Louisiana. The location was wrong. The transfer story was wrong. The BOP denied it. Henchman denied it. And a fact check published by Times Now found no independent verification of any attack whatsoever. But here is where the story gets several layers deeper. Because Jimmy Henchman didn't simply deny the claim and hang up. He provided context. He provided history. And in doing so, he revealed something that went well beyond this single post and spoke to the entire 20-year architecture of this rivalry. Tricked me once and got me. Sit with that line for a moment, because it is doing a tremendous amount of work. What Henchman appears to be suggesting, and this is a position he has expressed in various forms across multiple jailhouse statements and calls over the years, is that 50 Cent's public provocations are not simply entertainment. They are not just trolling. They are not pettiness dressed up as social media humor. In Henchman's reading of the situation, they are strategic. They are deliberate attempts to manipulate him into reacting in ways that could generate legal consequences or trigger physical confrontations inside prison that Henchman himself would be held responsible for. Think about what that implies. A man already serving multiple life sentences, a man with no realistic prospect of ever walking free, believes that his adversary on the outside is actively and methodically trying to make those life sentences worse, or to create situations that could cost him the small measure of relative safety and stability he has managed to build over 15 years behind bars. That is not a rat beef. That is psychological warfare with real-world stakes. And making matters even more significant, according to Hot New Hip Hop's reporting, this is not even the first time 50 Cent has publicly put out the claim that Jimmy Henchman was stabbed in prison. This is a recurring play. This is a pattern. And Henchman said so directly on the call. All Hip Hop reports that Henchman stated, "This is the second time this liar done put a rumor out there that I got stabbed up. Liars will always be liars. Especially lying-ass rappers." For his part, 50 Cent, as of this reporting, has not retracted a single word. He reportedly doubled down on his claims in the days following Henchman's phone call, which fits precisely, perfectly, and predictably into what any student of 50's career would immediately recognize as his standard playbook. State the claim publicly, let it spread, double down when challenged, never apologize, never retreat. He has been running this exact playbook since he systematically dismantled Ja Rule's entire career in the early 2000s, and he has not deviated from it once. Now on that phone call, Henchman also offered something else, something more revealing than the denial itself. He talked about the moment 50's posts went up and 15 different people from his network reached out to him about it all at once. He talked about how 50 has him blocked on Instagram, meaning he couldn't even see the posts himself. He was hearing about them secondhand. He talked about the weird looks some inmates give him. Not, he insisted, out of fear or aggression, but out of a perception that he had squandered his opportunities on the outside. He was calm, measured, controlled, and that controlled quality carried its own kind of message. That moment from the Academics breakdown, referencing Maserati Fox pulling out a weapon during one of the earliest confrontations between the G Unit and Tsar camps, is a reminder that this beef, at its peak, was not populated by men who were bluffing. Henchman's world was not a world of empty gestures. It was a world of real guns, real crews, and real consequences. The fact that the man at the center of that world is now calling collect to deny rumors of his own stabbing is a study in how dramatically the pendulum of power can swing. To truly understand why 50 Cent posting laughing emojis about Jimmy Henchman on Instagram in March of 2026 is not casual cruelty or pointless pettiness, but is instead a chapter in one of the most consequential ongoing narratives in all of hip-hop history, you have to travel all the way back to the moment this rivalry stopped being about business and started being about survival. And that is the absolute T-truth about James Rosemond. Whatever else history records about the man, and history has recorded a great deal, passivity was never his style, and surrender was never his instinct. So when Tony Yayo and G-Unit affiliate Lowell, Lodi Mac, Fletcher confronted and assaulted Rosemond's then 14-year-old son outside Czar Entertainment's offices in March of 2007. The boy reportedly slapped, threatened, and harassed while wearing Czar gear outside his father's own workplace. The reaction from Rosemond was not measured, was not patient, and was not peaceful. Witnesses who later testified at federal trial stated that Rosemond, from that moment forward, vowed to respond in three ways: legally, through music, and in the streets. And he meant all three. Retaliation came swift, and it came loud. Tony Yayo's bulletproof truck escaped direct harm. It was bulletproof after all. But the message was delivered with crystalline, unmistakable clarity. We are not retreating. And the violence continued to spiral outward from there, touching multiple people, multiple locations, and multiple lives. Alleged shootings targeted G-Unit members and their families. Confrontations erupted at industry events. And then, according to the documentary evidence that emerged during Rosemond's federal murder trial years later, something far more sinister was being planned at the very same time. According to testimony and documents introduced at trial, there was reportedly a coordinated effort to murder 50 Cent during the filming of the I'll Still Kill music video shoot with Akon in 2007. Silenced weapons were allegedly already in place. The crew was allegedly already on location. The operation was reportedly aborted only because of the complexity of Akon's presence on set. Too many variables, too many witnesses, too much uncertainty about the timing. Think about the sheer dark irony of that for a moment. A crew allegedly deployed to commit murder at a music video shoot for a song called I'll Still Kill. You cannot write that kind of irony. It writes itself. None of this, not a single frame of it, was lyrical combat or metaphorical street posturing. These were real bullets and real guns fired at real human beings in real places. And the deadliest chapter of all arrived in the fall of 2009. Lowell Lodi Mac Fletcher was released from prison in September of 2009, having served his time for the assault on Rosemond's son. He had 2 weeks of freedom. 2 weeks. On the evening of September 27, 2009, he was lured to a dark, secluded location near Mount Eden and Jerome Avenues in the Bronx. He was shot 5 times in the back with a silenced .22 caliber handgun. He died from his injuries that same night. Federal prosecutors, across the course of 3 separate trials, the first of which ended in a hung jury, the second of which was overturned on appeal, and the third of which delivered a guilty verdict, laid out what they described as an extraordinarily meticulous, cold-blooded murder-for-hire operation. The gun used in the shooting was alleged to be Rosemond's own weapon. The location was allegedly scouted and selected by Rosemond's network. Planning meetings allegedly took place at Central Park, at Whole Foods, at Houston's restaurant in Manhattan. Coded language used throughout, with the hit referred to as a hot date with a girl. Payment for the killing was allegedly delivered through Rosemond's cocaine trafficking operation in the form of 1 kilogram of cocaine, worth approximately $30,000 on the street. And text messages were introduced at trial showing Rosemond responding "have fun" after being informed that the lure had been set. On November 8, 2018, James Roseman was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years for the murder for hire of Lowell Fletcher, running consecutively with a prior life sentence he was already serving for federal drug trafficking charges. He will, barring extraordinary intervention, almost certainly never leave federal custody. He has maintained his innocence throughout, arguing the plan was never explicitly for murder and that the government relied on cooperating witnesses seeking their own sentence reductions. The jury, across multiple proceedings, rejected that argument. That word, rat, is 50 Cent's most deployed weapon in this long war, and it carries enormous specific weight in the culture from which both of these men emerged. Henchman has consistently and vigorously disputed that characterization, insisting that he was not a government cooperator and that the framework applied to him is deeply unjust. But in the narrative that 50 has controlled from the outside, while Henchman's voice has been limited to the occasional monitored phone call leaked to the internet, the label has calcified. It has become almost permanent in popular hip-hop discourse. Attaché. D to Henchman's name, the way a timestamp is attached to a photograph. And this brings us, finally fully, back to March of 2026, back to the Instagram post, back to the alleged footage, back to the gurney, back to the Bo P denial, back to the prison phone call, and back to the essential question underneath all of it. What is this really about? Because here is the honest answer. This is not simply about whether or not Jimmy Henchman was stabbed 3 months ago. The Bureau of Prisons has addressed that. Henchman has addressed that. The reporters who chased down the story have addressed that. No independent confirmation of any attack has emerged. No footage has been publicly released, and the claims appear to be unsubstantiated. A verdict that the BOP's own statement supports. What this is really about is something much larger and much more enduring. 50 Cent, who has built the entire post-rap phase of his public identity around the concept of surviving, of outlasting, of watching every single one of his enemies fall while he continues to rise, has found in Jimmy Henchman the perfect permanent counterpoint to his own narrative. A man he cannot shake hands with, a man he cannot settle with over lunch, a man who is sealed away behind federal concrete and steel and therefore can never fully rebut the story, can never fully claw back the narrative, can never fully reclaim the version of events that 50 has spent 2 decades constructing and distributing. And so 50 keeps posting, keeps trolling, keeps applying pressure from the outside, and Henchman, from inside, keeps pushing back through the only channel available to him, the monitored phone call, shaitan. In Islamic theology, that is the equivalent of the devil. James Roseman was not being subtle about how he views this dynamic, and there is something quietly powerful about a man in his position, serving time he will almost certainly never finish, stripped of virtually every tool of public self-defense, still finding the language, still finding the frame, still refusing to simply accept the narrative constructed around him. There are no heroes in this story. There are very few winners. Lodi Mack is dead. A real human being who died in the street in the Bronx, shot in the back, entangled in a war that began in a record label conference room. James Roseman, a man who at his peak negotiated boxing deals worth hundreds of millions, brokered $60 million worth of music contracts, and launched careers that generated tens of millions of records sold, is serving multiple life sentences inside a high-security federal facility in Louisiana, arguing his case to anyone still willing to listen through a phone line that is recorded and monitored at all times. And 50 Cent, the self-declared survivor, the beef general, the man who started from 9 bullet wounds and built an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars, is still, 20 years after all of this began, posting laughing emojis about his fallen rival on Instagram. And as of this reporting, he has not retracted a single word. The BOP has denied the attack. Henchman remains at USP Pollock in Louisiana. And this feud, one that has already claimed a life, consumed an empire, swallowed a man's freedom entirely, and generated more than 2 decades of blood, betrayal, legal proceedings, and social media warfare, shows absolutely no signs of arriving at any version of an ending. In the words of Curtis Jackson himself, it's hard to be tough around the tough.